There are 5 basic tastes. You've probably heard of them. Sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. But there's an incredibly vast world of food and flavors. So what exactly is flavor? And can I, just a regular guy, really figure out how to understand and enjoy food even more than I do? So I talked to some experts, and it turns out that I can. And so can you. But you have to start somewhere. I'm Evan Young, and this is Fever for Flavor. As a working professional, my very first day at my very first corporate job, I stuffed envelopes. But the job was at a medical publishing company, and eventually, I worked my way up the ladder to spend a whole bunch of years there as a medical journalist. And if that sounds sexy to you, trust me, it is a lot less sexy than it sounds. The good news is that eventually I went on to other even less sexy sounding jobs that we do not need to get into. But while I didn't love being a journalist per se, I will give it some credit. It forced the most scientifically curious side of me to dig into complex topics and try to unwind them. Flavor, along with about a zillion other biological processes in the body, is a fascinatingly complex scientific topic just as much as it's a fun and unique way to enjoy an ice cream cone. This podcast would be nothing if we couldn't find and talk to an actual PhD, an expert on human perception of chemical stimuli. Luckily for all of us in and around Philadelphia, the Monell Chemical Senses Center on Market Street is a world-renowned institution dedicated to the science of taste and smell. And I was able to catch up with Paul Wise on the staff there. And I just started asking Paul questions, from what the basic definition of flavor actually is, to what smell has to do with it all, to whether we can actually trust our eyes and noses and our taste buds. All of that and more coming up next on Fever for Flavor. Oh, yeah! Paul, thank you so much for having me down here at Monell. I'm really excited to be here, so thank you.
Yeah, pleasure to speak with you.
I think that I have some relatively softball questions to throw at you for someone who is as much of an expert as you are. So that first softball question is there something that is a universally agreed upon definition of what flavor is?
No, in usual fashion among academics, I would say there is no universally agreed upon definition. We can start with the International Standards Organization definition, and I'll paraphrase. It's a combination and interaction of taste, smell, and chemesthesis that you experience when you eat foods or drink a beverage. And chemesthesis literally means chemical feel. It's the sensation you get from chemical stimulation of somatosensory or skin sense nerves. So think the burn of hot peppers, the cooling of menthol, and a few other interesting ones like the tingling of Szechuan peppers. In that definition, they go on to say that this can be modulated by other somatosensations like heat, like pain, like pressure. That's about as far as that goes. Now, other people would expand this out to include other sensations, including color and sound. Some people do, some people don't. One person that is a big proponent of widening the definition of flavor is a professor named Charles Spence at Oxford University. And he's done a ton of cool stuff. So any of your listeners, type in SPENCE Oxford, and they'll take you there, and he has some wonderful content. Some examples of sound. You may have heard the term sonic seasoning.
No.
No. Okay.
No. Okay.
There are pieces of music that people will say is associated with sweetness, and so like melodic, higher pitched tones. Yeah. And some music people will say is more consistent with bitterness, like brassy, low tones. He's done some experiments where you play one or the other. So if you play sweet music, that can enhance the sweetness, say, of a toffee that you taste. It can increase the bitterness if you play like the brassy, bitter kind of music. Not a lot, like 5 or 10%. But some people out in the real world have used these. Some other examples are like at a seafood, you're eating seafood at a restaurant, you hear ocean sounds, and it makes people rate the seafood as fresher.
Jeez.
Other one that's real famous, and this is also a Charles Spence experiment, is the influence of sound on texture or mouthfeel. So high frequency crunching, crackling sounds are associated with crispness and freshness. It works for chips. It works for fruit like apples.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of an interesting question here is this about expectation? Is it about other kinds of response bias?
Mm-hmm.
Or does this genuinely on a fundamental level change the way you perceive the crispness?
Yeah.
Don't think anybody can answer that question, but people he interviewed in his experiment did think that the same chips came from different batches based on how they manipulated the sound.
That's just wild to think about. And I think what's interesting about it is that you're talking about things that are happening outside your skull, right? Because when you chew, you can hear what's happening inside your mouth, of course, but also the music that's piping its way into your eardrums that has, you would think, nothing to do with the food that you're eating. And it's just wild to think about that as having an impact on your perception of enjoyment or pleasure. I mean, it's really interesting too, because the playlist at your cafe matters, or the playlist at your restaurant actually does matter. And that's mind-boggling to think about that.
I know that, or at least I have read that Spence has worked with an airline to make playlists to accompany foods. And part of the issue is on an airplane, the food tastes a little bit bland.
Right.
And there's various reasons that could happen, but one is like general loud noises can overall just decrease the intensity of taste.
Well, it must be really hard to unwind the actual flavor experience of your typical airline food versus the setting on an airplane. But we sort of blown by the things that I thought we might initially start with, at least, which is sour and sweet flavors and tastes, and the things that are, hitting your tongue, into these other areas that I don't know if the average person even thinks about.
Yes, like you said, they're recognized 5 basic tastes, and then there may be others. Incidentally, the idea of basic taste is something that's not universally accepted. Some people think there are a range of taste sensations, and there probably are, whether those are combinations of the basic tastes or their own unique thing. But we have specialized receptors in our taste buds on the tongue. 3 of them that we know of that serve sweet, bitter, and umami. They're G protein coupled receptors, very much like many receptors for neurotransmitters and hormones. Sour and salty, we think, are ion channels, and there's some idea as to what those things are. Problems there is that, salty is from sodium ions, a few other things, and sour is from acidification, hydrogen ions. Those 2 stimuli just do so many different things to any different nerve ending and different tissue that it's really hard to figure out if something responds. Is it actually the sour receptor? And what people refer to generally in conversation as taste also includes other things. So the next biggest component of it, and some would argue maybe the defining component of a particular flavor, is smell. You have a patch of about something like 1 centimeter squared. It's about 3 centimeters above your nostrils and a little bit back. In that, there are endings of olfactory receptor neurons, only true neurons that extend outside the body, which is kind of interesting. Probably about 400 of them in humans, give or take. The list grows. Each one of those proteins tends to respond to some molecules, but not others. However, molecules usually will stimulate more than one of those. So it's the mosaic of active receptors at the right in the nose that's the first step in coding odor. That signal gets sent up to the brain and up to the first relay olfactory bulbs, and it goes to various areas of the brain.
Yeah.
There's 2 aspects of smell that are important for flavor. So you can sniff before you've eaten it, and that's important for expectation and appetite, and you can salivate in response to that. But for the flavor, you're perceiving those molecules that are coming from your mouth, going up the back route, back up to the nose, and it's getting to that same patch of olfactory mucosa just by a different route. So I've heard people, and I don't know exactly how they estimate that like 80% of flavor comes from the system in your nose. Other systems involved. So you have one called TRP, transient receptor potential melastatin 8. That's the cool receptor. So it responds to menthol. You have TRPV1, it's vanilloid 1. That one is chili pepper, also ethanol. And then you have another one is TRPA1. This one responds to a lot of different things, including reactive chemicals. But one of the food-wise, it will respond to wasabi and hot mustard, and also acidification inside the cell, which is where you get the bite from carbonation.
Yeah.
So it's important in that too.
To me, what you're talking about is sensation in there too, and it seems tightly wound in with what I would think about as flavor. It's also sensation. So sour and spicy, these are sensations and flavors, I guess, at the same time. Is that accurate,
I guess you could say a flavor is a sensation. Taste is a sensation. It's also a component of flavor. I don't know.
Even just listening to you, it is so, I mean, I don't know if I would say hopelessly complex. It just seems clearly incredibly complex. I have so many questions about why it is so complex that I don't know if you could or couldn't answer, but like one of the basic ones for me is, why is there a system that needed to be created for humans to evolve and survive? Because everything you put into your body is presumably going into it for a reason. Yeah. So why do we evolve in such a way is to create a difference between the way your tongue picks up sensations and flavors and molecules versus the way your olfactory system does the same thing versus the way your eyes and your ears may function tangentially to the entire process. It's sort of miraculous but also very strange. Like, why don't you just put something in the flavor compartment and your body figures out based in just this one input, and then you're off to the races?
Well, I mean, part of the answer here is that all of these things, sensations, are being caused as a result of how the body responds to chemicals. But the properties of those chemicals are very, very different. So taste is going to be doing water-soluble, non-volatile molecules. Olfaction is going to be doing volatile molecules. Chemesthesis, that's going to do a mixture of both. Different system to detect different kinds of molecules, and also within subsystems, maybe different kinds of functions. So like bitter, people would argue, evolved to warn us plant toxins.
Yeah.
There's a problem with that people discuss, in that bitterness does not correlate very strongly with toxicity. So some very bitter things are not toxic, and some very toxic things are not bitter. So that doesn't quite work. Some other people have argued that it's better to think of it as bitterness is detecting biologically active molecules, so things that can cause specific physiological responses in your body. Whether those are good or bad, you'd have to learn by experience.
Right.
But basically, this is something that's going to interact with your body. Pay attention to it. Sweetness, people argue, evolved to detect energy in plants for plant-eating animals. Probably the best support for this is the fact that a lot of carnivorous animals have lost their sense of sweet taste, including our friend the house cat.
Cat, right?
And they have sweet receptors of a kind. They just don't work anymore because they've accumulated random mutations over millennia or longer to where basically no selective pressure. So the old biological rule of use it or lose it, they don't use it and they've lost it.
Right.
And some other animals that have even fewer taste receptors, things like dolphins that swallow their food whole. So it's you by the those animals, by the time they ingest, they've committed.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've kind of found kind of interesting, these receptors that are temperature sensitive and chemically sensitive. One idea with like hot pepper is that plants evolved it as something to discourage us from eating them.
Ended up being the opposite, right?
Well, for humans,
For
like
humans,
almost all other animals were rejected. And we'll do things like, so the people are might argue that some kinds of fungus develop these psychoactive things like psilocybin to discourage. Yeah, and then humans tend to go for those too.
Yeah.
So we seem to be a weird species in that way. Yeah. We really do.
Yeah. As an example, I feel like if I eat something that is spicy and the temperature of that food is hotter, the spice factor of it goes up for me. Is that actually true, or is that just my own personal
that's real, and that's understood at a very low. So this TRPV1 receptor, it responds both to heating and to capsaicin, the main compound in chili pepper, but they potentiate each other. So if you increase the temperature, that will lower the amount of capsaicin you need to trigger it.
Can you sort of definitively give us the solution for when you've eaten something way too spicy? Because I've read all kinds of things like, milk is one that everybody talks about, but bread or crackers or water or anything else.
Right. Well, capsaicin in particular is very lipid soluble, so it's going to dissolve into tissue better than things that are not. Some people say that fat is important to pull that out. Milk has fat. For sure. I mean, I don't think anybody's established that definitively. Also argue that some milk proteins bind to capsaicin or alter it. I'm not a chemist. Don't even play one on TV. I'm sure you guess. But I mean, it could be that there's chemical interactions there. But the last one that's immediate and surefire. So heat potentiates the TRPV1 receptor. It goes the other way. So if you cool it, it increases the amount of capsaicin. Ice cube. Okay. Or you could go with ice cream, which is cold and has fat and has milk proteins.
Got all the above.
So that's also tastes good, great for dessert.
Yeah.
So maybe that's one reason. I don't know. I like a little scoop of ice cream after a Thai meal.
If you eat something spicy, and let's just say theoretically you were able to clear out all of the capsaicin from your mouth immediately right afterwards, you're still getting that spicy sensation for some amount of time. Is that right?
Well, yeah, although you're probably not clearing out all the capsaicin.
Okay.
There are aspects of the timing of presentation that affects sensitivity. And this was maybe academic, but this was done at Monell, I think in the early 70s by Barry Green, who is now at Yale. But he showed that basically if you put a little capsaicin patch on somebody's tongue and then pull it off and do it again and again and again, if you do that in a tight time frame, burn just keeps going up and up and up and up. But then if you take the patch off and you wait a little bit, something happens to desensitize the nerve, and all of a sudden it's profoundly desensitized. So the timing of how you consume it, at least in the lab, matters quite a bit. Yeah. Food, it's harder to study that.
Yeah. Is it accurate to say that some people can handle much spicier food? I mean, clearly in the real world, some people can handle things that are way spicier than other people. And
sure.
Is that just because of practice? They get used to the sensation. There's something happening. Then
long term, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg consumer. So heavy chili consumers tend to be a little sensitive to capsaicin on the tongue. But are they less sensitive because they eat a lot of chili, or do they eat a lot of chili because they're less sensitive? It could be an interaction. Experience seems to be a reasonable. It could be the structure of the tongue. So the easier it is for that molecules to dissolve into the tissue and get to those nerve endings, the more sensitive you'll be. I mean, in general, if you take like a series of fatty acids that are irritating, the larger, so you just go it's methanol, ethanol, butanol, hexanol. So the more carbons you put on the base chain, the more lipophilic it'll tend to be, and the more potent it is as an irritant. Up to, and there's some limits and caveats, but so there could be individual differences in your saliva layer, in the structure of your skin. Could be individual differences in the form of the receptors. There are genetically determined differences in the forms of those receptors. No one, as far as I know, has been able to as clearly link that to individual differences in perception.
Usually, colloquially, we'll just boil it down to people being like more or less wimpy than other people as far as what they can handle.
And there's some of them, for whatever reason, people have a certain level of spice that they like, for whatever reason that is. But whatever that is, they'll go right up to that. They like to go up to that. I consider myself a burn enjoyer, but I met my limit with some famous plate of wings, like the death wings at this restaurant in Florida. Now, those were great. They brought them out and they were like, they were caked with sauce. Like the sauce was really thick, but you could see like seeds in the sauce. So I don't know how they've done that. A friend and I were eating those, and towards the end we were peeling our lips back so we wouldn't touch it. So it's nice to say you've done it. But.
Yeah, well, here we are talking about spicy for such a long time, and I actually didn't even think that spicy was a flavor per se. I guess what I feel like I've heard is that spicy is a sensation.
Well,
Cool is a sensation, but is it actually also a flavor?
I guess that's a matter of definition in some ways.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's certainly something you experience when you eat. According to the ISO definition, it's part of flavor. It's a component of flavor. So I think of it that way.
To back up or just move over to the other tastes, sour feels like something you feel, or sour seems like something that you can feel. Like I can tell if something feels sour because you have a reaction to it, like whether you're puckering or
you'll salivate.
Like, but sweet never feels like that. Salty to me never feels like that. And umami never feels like that. So is there something that is very different happening there?
Things that are sour are usually somewhat astringent, and they're correlated. Like the stronger it gets, the sourness and the astringency, like acids particularly, they can have effects on salivary proteins. Like one part of astringency, very prominent in tannins and like wines and tea, actually bind with and precipitate salivary proteins, and it creates a gummy layer on the fuzzy teeth. Some of these compounds can interact with salivary proteins, or they can interact with the kind of mucus pellicle coating that covers your mouth and change lubricating properties. A lot of acids do that.
I always thought that red wine, when I have a cold, helps to dry me out. Now, I have never shared that actually with anybody, but every so often, if I have like a little bit of congestion, I feel like red wine is something that will help. Is that actually based in something that you just said? Any kind of reality?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I would think that most of those things aren't volatile, so most of those things aren't going to get up to your nasal cavity in any concentration to really affect, but I don't know. Could be indirect.
Talk that one away. Maybe I'll ask someone else. It must be fascinating to get 5 folks like yourself here at Monell together in a room out to dinner at the same time. Is that very different as an experience than it is to go out to eat with somebody who doesn't study this?
Be surprised how many foodies. Well, maybe you wouldn't be surprised at how many foodies there are these days, but we may be a little more likely to analyze what we're eating in terms of flavor sensation, or play with things or taste things in a slightly different way, but not so much different.
Really? Well, given that you study it as a profession, do you come at food and flavor just from a completely different place, though, than the rest of us? And is that either a good place at times, or is it a bad place or a bad way to come at it at times?
One thing that's true, I think, for me and some others, is that I've gotten to a point where I have minimal emotional reactions to something that's intensely hot or intensely cooling or intensely bitter. It's just kind of, it's information.
Okay. And is that because are you actively at your job here tasting and testing things all the time?
Oh, sure. I mean, I will taste everything before I give it to anybody else. Absolutely. I'll be the first subject in pretty much any experiment I do.
Are you using actual food ingredients? Are they chemical ingredients, or are they things on dabs of paper?
Yeah, well, it depends on the experiment. I mean, one of our big go-tos would be simple aqueous solutions, or just taste ingredients like sucrose, like citric acid, like quinine, which gives tonic water its bitterness, dissolved in water. And they're simple, controllable. We do work with model foods when appropriate.
What do you mean by model foods?
Model food is just a fancy way of saying a food that we make for the purpose of.
Oh, okay.
So like a vanilla pudding.
A particularly behaved food is a model food.
There you go. Yeah. Like a vanilla pudding that varies in the level of sucrose, something like that.
Now you have to set up those as controls. So do you need a vanilla pudding to always be the exact same vanilla pudding because you're measuring it against something else, or you're just trying to break down what it is?
We're usually interested in something else, like, whether somebody's sweet sensitivity or salt sensitivity changes depending on how much salt or sugar they're exposed to in the diet. We're looking at liking hedonic response. We want something that's somewhat realistic. But yeah, I mean, you want the food to be exactly the same in every way possible, except the one thing you're trying to manipulate.
Yeah.
So maybe we're a little more careful than that than an average chef, but never not. I mean, pastry chefs tend to be pretty precise in their measurements of ingredients, I've heard.
Are the people who are coming to you or to Monell looking for answers for things, are they large corporations? Are they the Coca-Colas of the world trying to develop products? Are they popular chefs that own restaurant chains trying to figure out new menus? How do the things that you study apply to the world?
We talk to a large number of people. I mean, we talk to dietitians, nutritionists, physicians. We have an active program where we partner with corporations, mostly food, beverage, flavor, and ingredient, all those pharmaceutical as well, of other, materials, a few other industries sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
We have various levels of partnership, but some of them collaborate in research. They usually bring to us basic research questions, like how does sour taste work, or something like that.
That's almost like what I'm asking here.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah.
And then they might have specific applications, including a lot of the usual stuff. How do we make a beverage taste better with less calories? How do we make a soup that tastes just as good with less salt?
Mm-hmm.
And recently, we got this horrible bitter medicine that unfortunately children need to take in liquid form so they experience it in their full glory.
Mm-hmm.
How can we knock down the bitterness so that kids will take their medicine and be healthy?
Well, that's an incredibly important application in the real world. And that's, to knock down the bitterness in a medicine like that. Are you not really stripping anything out, but are you masking it by introducing sweet or other flavors?
Yeah, well, that's the trick. If you could strip out the offending compound, then that's easy. Right. Or if you could bind it chemically so that it sneaks past the taste buds, I guess that's okay, but then you'd have to prove that it unbinds during digestion.
Yeah.
But that's also some antioxidants and important plant nutrients, plant proteins. Sometimes you can't remove the offending compound because that's the compound that's giving you the benefit.
Right. I get to take a moment real quick to just drag Pfizer through the mud for just a minute. I have taken Paxlovid a couple times for COVID. Have you heard about the aftertaste that Paxlovid keeps? So I don't know how it works specifically, scientifically speaking, but when you take Paxlovid, that bitter taste is listed as a side effect of the drug, and it is horrible. I mean, it is a horrible taste that lasts the entire time when you're on it, and would have been great if they could have figured that out.
Taste effects are actually a growing category of drug side effects reported in databases, and chemotherapy drugs are notorious.
Okay.
Semaglutides, GLP-1 drugs, they're having taste effects too.
Are they really?
So that seems to be a major frontier in the food industry, is how do you create foods that taste good to people who are taking weight loss drugs?
I always thought it was just a gut effect or something to do with like the hormone signaling in your gut that is making you feel full. That was the trick with all GLP-1s. Is that?
Well, some of these circulating hormones relating to taste and satiety also have taste effects, including sometimes direct effects on taste cells and taste buds.
Wow.
So you're getting some modulation there too, although I don't think anybody's nailed down completely what the effects are of some of these GLP-1 drugs.
Yeah. Well, but a good question there, though, is even if you were to strip away things taste or make them less enjoyable, for example, hunger is still going to override. You're going to put anything in your body if you're hungry enough, no matter what it tastes like, I assume. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's for the scientists there to figure out.
Your sensitivity to sucrose, table sugar, can change with hunger versus satiety. One thing that I always thought would be kind of fun. So people have talked about we evolved to detect bitter to avoid plant toxins. Mm-hmm. We evolved sweet to detect energy in plants. Mm-hmm. Other people have argued that it's not either one of those that really matters. What matters is the interaction between the two.
Really?
So anytime you eat, you're eating good stuff and toxins, and some toxins. I mean, maybe insignificant amounts. The question is, if you get hungry, will you tolerate a higher bitter to sweet ratio than if you're not?
Right.
How are these systems being pushed around to drive? Yeah.
As any parent can tell you, the hungrier your kid is, the more likely they are to eat the broccoli. I mean, that's common sense, right? So, or at least obvious in practice, because I would assume too, you're really not ever getting a food that is purely sweet or purely bitter. I mean, everything mixes. Everything is bits and shades of all the different flavors.
Yeah.
in any given moment.
An incredible amount of the science of taste and smell is boldly demonstrating in the laboratory what everyone already knows to be true.
Oh, really?
But it's a good story. There was a food truck that used to be there. Old guy had been there for decades. But anyway, one of our postdocs was out talking to him, and he said, "So what's new at the Monell Center?" And he said, "We demonstrated that sodium blocks bitterness, which it does, right at those bitter receptors." Yeah. And he says, "Well, you college boys finally caught on to that. I've been salting my bag coffee for 40 years."
That's great.
No, a lot of chefs will know these tricks too, which is kind of, as a researcher, you can get some directions from talking to people about what they do in their kitchens. Another story, I wasn't involved in this, but I think it's one of the most interesting, fun stories at Monell for forever. So a very senior colleague, 2 directors ago of Monell, he used to run the place. Now he just has fun doing research. He was at a olive oil tasting, and one of the things they judge a good olive oil by is when you trickle it down the throat, and they might serve it in these wine glasses so you can smell it. But a good olive oil burns you in the throat.
Really?
Yeah. And
is it like a little bit peppery then? Or?
Peppery, tingly bite, and try it. So it has to be good good extra virgin olive oil. And in fact, the more, and you kind of have to let it kind of trickle. It's not as good if you just straight swallow it. It has to contact and slowly go down to get the best effect. But the more prickling it is, the more healthful it is. So he noticed this sensation and noticed that it was similar to the sensation you get from ibuprofen. Ibuprofen, it was known, stimulates these TRPA1 receptors, which do wasabi and hot mustard and carbonation. So he said, "Hey, that feels the same." They started a research program that's still going and now decades long, but they found a compound in olive oil they've called oleocanthal for olive and sting, really? Some combination of those. But it is a natural anti-inflammatory and works some of the same mechanism as like ibuprofen. And they now think it's one of the major beneficial components of the Mediterranean diet. So that's a case where you're just out tasting something and somebody, olive farmer tells you this is what you should pay attention to. You taste it and go, "Hey," and that eventually leads to isolating a compound. And
that is really neat, because I feel like I've always heard olive oil is great for you, right? And I'm always going to try to cook with olive oil over.
The one thing is, if you cook it, it breaks down that compound. So it's better if you mix a little balsamic vinegar and put it on your salad.
Okay, but because I'm not going to just start drinking it.
No, we didn't drink it. No. I kind of like it, actually.
Do you really?
Just having done a little bit of it. I've been a subject in some of their experiments. It's been fun.
So if somebody at home wanted to do what you just described, they would literally take just like maybe a spoonful of olive oil and
doesn't take
tilt
much.
It back.
Yeah, just kind of put it on the back of your tongue and then tilt your head back and just let it trickle. And so if there's a really good correlation between the concentration of oleocanthal, which is the good stuff you want, and the intensity of the sting, as I said before. So if you want to evaluate different brands of olive oil, you might find it published at this point. But if you want to know what's the best olive oil for you in terms of this antioxidant or anti-inflammatory compound, find the one that test a few and find the one that stings the most, and that's likely going to be the one that you should go with.
What a great test, because I feel like olive oil is one of those things you never really know what you're getting, because you can look at the color and am I going to spend $26 on a quart, or am I going to spend $8.99? And is it really all that different? Sure, in salads you could tell a difference, but cooking with it, who knows? That's pretty cool. That's a great practical grocery store suggestion for people.
Yeah, I think, and to give proper credit, if I didn't before, the 3 people actually here most directly involved in that is Paul Breslin, Gary Beecham, and Kathy Perot.
I'm also curious then about some other things that are fun stories. One of them I'm fascinated by is a lot of people have a reaction. I think you hear it less with blue cheese, but like in the old Bugs Bunny cartoons, Limburger cheese, like the stinky stuff. Or I have seen gag reflex reactions when people eat durian. Have you ever had durian?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan.
Okay. I can get past the smell, but to go back to what you were saying before, there's the smell at the front before it goes in, and then there's smell once it's inside, and maybe blue cheese, since a lot of people may not have had durian that are listening to this. But is blue cheese one of those that fits that bill where it's just going to smell. If you actually smell blue cheese, I mean, it's pretty bad, but when you eat it, you're not really smelling anything even remotely like what it smells like.
And it's good.
Yeah,
So
it's great, yeah.
part of that's going to depend on if you know what it is or not. You can give people, I think it's butyric or valeric acid, but it's one of these short chain fatty acids that smells like kind of vomit or very unpleasant. But if you give it to people blind, they're going to go yuck. If you give it to people also and tell them that it's gym socks, then they're going to have a very negative reaction. But if you give it to people and call it blue cheese, then
they're okay.
They're better with it. Yeah. And that interacts with hunger too. So food odors, you'll be more accepting of them if you're hungry.
I heard this other thing, and maybe you could confirm whether this is true or not. In coffee, is there a compound or a taste or flavor molecule in coffee that is the same as there is in decaying or decomposing?
Yeah, there's
flesh?
all kinds of sulfur-based compounds.
Okay.
Got to be, and in meat too, and in cabbage and in broccoli. They can be important components of the flavor, but it has to be at the right ratio.
Okay.
So as long as it's not overbalancing it, then I guess then you would interpret that as spoiled.
Not the coffee, but the meat, for example.
Yeah. But right. So yeah, coffee's fairly complex, and I forgot. I mean, there are hundreds of volatiles. I think there's a guy in Germany. I think says he can reproduce it with 20 or so. So
reproduce
the flavor of coffee. That's kind of a game. Is you put that flavor of a food through a gas chromatograph, and it separates it out into these little peaks according to how long it clings to the column. They call it GC olfactometry. So you go put strawberry in there, and then each time a peak comes out, a person sits there and sniffs and writes down how strong is it, what does it smell like. So, but you can then identify those, but then you can start reconstructing it. Like if I put these 10 together, does it smell like strawberry?
The humans that have ever had an orange or a strawberry in their lives know exactly what that is. But if you were to give me a very sour orange versus a very sweet orange versus some different, all these different varietals of oranges, whatever the case may be, despite a very different flavor profile, I am going to know that's an orange.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So how do we know?
Right.
I mean, as long as it's close enough, if it's, especially if it has something unexpected, it really puts you off. There's a professor named Richard Stevenson that has a theory, and it explains a lot, that you don't directly perceive an odor. You smell something, it activates a stored memory template, and that's what you perceive. It just has to be close enough to activate that template. Now, the closer it is, the more likely it would be to activate that template. But there's some interesting phenomena. So try this. Go to your cabinet, and you need to be blind, so you need a partner. But all these different extracts like banana and vanilla, peanut butter, or even just like things from your pantry. Smell it, and if you don't know quite what it is, it'll smell familiar. You vaguely think, I know it, but like banana extract, if you say banana, all of a sudden something snaps into place. And suddenly, yeah, I can see that.
So we're maybe not quite as good as we might think we are at identifying things, because it requires all these other parts of the perception of that thing, including history with it before you eat it, to say that's an orange.
Usually that's right. You're never going to smell a disembodied orange. You're going to see it. You're going to handle it. You're going to peel it. So all of those things could be activating expectations as you go along. In general, we're not really wired to perceive smells or tastes or touch. We're wired to perceive objects in the world around us. Combining sensations from touch and smell and sight and vision kind of is not completely unusual to flavor. But I guess you could say flavor is the quintessentially multimodal, complex multisensory experience.
Never would have thought about it like that.
Others have done experiments on color, and it has some fairly profound effects. And one of the studies that gets cited the most is the wine experts. and have them describe wines. And if you taste a red wine, you'll duly describe it as having chocolate notes and berry notes and other red wine appropriate. If you taste a white wine, straw and lychee and whatever citrus, whatever they attribute to that. But you can take the same white wine, put a drop of red food coloring in it, and the same people will be more likely to use the red wine descriptors. Lots of effects like that, like orange or red color can enhance perceived sweetness. Identification. You can have like orange juice and this is for the UK people, like black currant juice. So you can take black currant and orange juice and color one gray and the other one vice versa. And that'll bias people to perceive them as the color congruent. So all of those are kind of interesting. I always am most impressed not by outcomes where you have to tell me what you perceive, although those are very useful. I like to see influences on what you can do, objectively observable behavior. So like in a task, your ability to discriminate. I give you strawberry, I give you cherry. You smell those, you tell me which one is cherry, which one is strawberry, or are they the same, or are they different? I mean, things where there's an objectively right or wrong answer. Okay. And if you'll do something like color those two red, you're going to be better at it than if you color them both green, which is, if you're just doing it by smell, why should that matter? But if the color
hang on, you have to back up then. Yeah. So you're saying that if you were to like mash up a cherry and mash up a strawberry and put
or let's just say cherry juice and strawberry juice that otherwise would be look fairly the same.
Okay. And then I would have an easier time identifying which one was cherry and which one was strawberry if you hadn't changed their color.
If you color them red versus if you color them green. So if it's the expected color, somehow it's doing something in your brain to facilitate processing and perception.
That doesn't seem to make any sense.
It's kind of wild. Yeah. But again, it's just our brain is not geared to really process just a smell. I mean, you take a sniff and you can smell a fire, or you're, finding something that's spoiled versus not spoiled. I mean, but by and large, you're not going to have a cherry smell and a strawberry smell. You're going to have a cherry and a strawberry. Right. I mean, so the more inputs you get towards that object, somehow the more clearly you can perceive it.
To talk about the wine experiment for just a second, the implications, I think, of what that experiment shows are, they're kind of distressing for not just experts in wine, but the average consumer too, I feel like, right?
Yeah, well, and I think they did average consumer and they did experts, and both of them were affected. So we're all humans, so we're all going to be. But it is also true, I think, that with training and with expertise, you can discern differences better than an untrained person. So
sure, but it also sounds to me like I should just buy a $9 bottle of wine and not worry about it too much.
At some level, there was a wine at Trader Joe's for a long time. I forgot the name, but everybody called it $2 check. Right. This was obviously some time ago. There is no such thing as probably a $2 wine now. Yeah. But if it tastes good, if you like it.
Well, at some point, though, you have to be able to be an expert on something, and maybe then the thing you're really just only an expert on is what you personally prefer and enjoy. If you were to put a $9 bottle of wine in front of me and a $300 bottle of wine or something like that, and if effectively you're saying, look, an expert, even a sommelier, maybe they can tell the difference, maybe they can't. If they're more educated and better at it, probably, but some portion of people really can't tell the difference. It just simply comes down to which one am I going to like more. Yeah. And then I might as well, I can't afford $300 bottles of wine all that often, but I might as well just enjoy the thing that I enjoy and not worry about the other factors, right?
There's going to be some overlap on quality. I mean, so spirits are one thing that there's a different mix of compounds in something that's aged than not, that's smooth versus rough. People are going to, by and large, like the smoother one. So, I'm sure that there are real differences. All the time, I know somebody that's worked for a long time in R&D and distilled spirits, and he's fairly convinced that the most important thing is that you match the concept to the flavor or the idea of the product you're selling, like perfume.
Mm-hmm.
The packaging has to be the right color and the right shape, at least for perfume, to match the smell. And that's going to be the most important thing.
Well, that might be chicken or egg too, though.
Yeah.
I feel like, right? Because perfume packaging has sort of become the thing that we all expect it to be these days.
Possibly. For myself, I go to Wegmans grocery store. I'm not trying to plug them. They're not giving me any money, but for some reason, their store brand is almost always as good as the big name brands, and so it's cheaper. So
I will anti-plug Wegmans, and they don't refrigerate their cheeses well enough.
Okay. No, that's good to know.
Yeah, I mean they do, but I feel like their cheeses they don't last quite as long as the ones I'll get from the old Giant. But you get a much wider range at Wegmans, and who knows, maybe they'll advertise with my podcast. So we haven't actually touched on umami at all as a flavor so much. Very curious about umami. It's this sort of great misunderstood, or at least relatively ignored in Western culture, since it's a bit of a newer entry into the overall landscape of flavor. I mean, can you give us a 30-second soundbite on what the heck is umami? And then also what kokumi is, which is a completely different, but in the same ballpark as umami, as I understand it, idea or concept.
So umami is the taste of some amino acids and other simple proteins. Monosodium glutamate, the glutamate component, would be kind of a prototypical umami stimulus. Yeah, they use it in all kinds of foods, but it's also in tomatoes and cheese and mushrooms, other things. It alone, though, doesn't really make a powerful umami sensation. You need other things, like the big one in Japanese cuisine that they discovered early on is bonito flakes and seaweed. So it's inositates and glutamate. If you put it together, you get this big synergistic impact on umami receptors, which were closely related to sweet receptors and a little bit related to bitter receptors.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting for a couple ways. It's very yummy in the context of foods, but disembodied, like presenting it just alone in solution, it doesn't tend to be very pleasant, but it's really magic, wonderful interaction as part of other flavor profile.
It's kind of a flavor.
That's a good way to say it. And also it doesn't ever seem to get super strong on its own.
Is it hard to discern for the average person? I feel like I sort of get what's common about the foods that you just mentioned, but I also sort of don't.
Well, it seems to be perceptually related. Well, part of it is monosodium glutamate, MSG, has sodium, so it's slightly salty. But it seems to be confusable with saltiness for a lot of people, but they can train pretty quickly, and people can get pretty good at, say, telling the difference between MSG and a matched concentration of sodium chloride. So kokumi is like umami, a Japanese term experienced over there. People will refer to it as a fullness of flavor, a roundness, a continuity.
Like richness? Like the way we use the word rich? Okay.
Maybe, but rich, for me, I don't know exactly what they're talking about. So some people talk about it in terms of a mouthfeel. Some people talk about it in terms of enhancing taste, particularly umami. There being some kind of positive interaction between these two. It's a different molecule. It's a tripeptide glutathione that's also a powerful antioxidant. So some people take it as a supplement, get higher concentrations. But it stimulates calcium receptors, which is dissimilar to some of these other things. Exactly how it works, a lot of people have tried to study it in people from the West, and they have a hard time getting Western palates to perceive it.
Really?
Yet it seems to be readily perceivable by Japanese folks. And they, so if you put some glutathione in something, they can tell.
Really?
If you, at the right levels. And we can tell if it's high enough, right?
Yeah.
It's disgusting. It gets more complicated. So there's kokumi, which refers specifically to this flavor that we might associate with glutathione, whether that's a feel, an enhancement of taste, or some combination of both. Different people have different opinions, I've heard. But no, they also have another flavor term they call koku, which could include kokumi, but it also can include smell and other aspects of flavor, that it's kind of basically means yummy, impactful. It's something I haven't quite gotten my head around, but I know people come to us and ask about kokumi, and it's an interesting thing to study.
Sure,
but we have to say that, we're not 100% sure we can get our panels to comment on it.
Well, I've seen it described. Imagine a pot of stew, like a vegetable soup or something like that you're making when you just chopped everything up and you just put it on, and then imagine it 4 hours later when it's been simmering.
Everything mixes together, or maybe reaction products, and it creates a more full flavor.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, again, it's something that's hard to think about because I've tried to perceive it.
Oh, and you can't.
I can't.
Huh.
No.
Huh. Well, then I feel like it's hopeless for me. But,
well, no. Just because I study this doesn't mean I have the most acute
yeah.
tongue and nose. I actually don't. I think those who have tasted my cooking can attest that I shouldn't be opening a restaurant anytime soon.
No. You've defined flavor in such a kind of a much broader way than I've been defining it. I've been saying like of the 5 basic tastes, and you already kind of said, well, look, that's a little bit subjective because cool and spicy and these other sensations could also be flavor. But of anything that, you could taste, but in the broad categories, sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami, and then add
all the others.
Yeah. If you were forced to live without one of those for the rest of your...
Definitely not aroma. I might choose bitter for myself because I'm fairly sensitive to the bitterness of cruciferous vegetables.
Okay.
And other wonderful
Didn't eat your
plant
greens
proteins.
Then? Not eating your greens now.
Still eat my greens. I just eat my greens now. Don't like them though.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think I might be able to do without that. And the other thing is, bitter as a warning system. I mean, the modern food supply is pretty good. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's something you could somewhat live without.
Yeah. Do you particularly enjoy any bitter foods though, or drinks?
It varies, and it depends on context. And you talked a little bit about, I think you referred to acquired tastes and experience, but
sure.
When I drank beer, I used to like very hoppy. But my coffee, I like the dark roast, and I like to put milk in it so it knocks the bitter down. But by and large, yeah, I'm not a super big fan of bitter.
Yeah, I think bitter might be the very last thing I give up. I would hold on to bitter till the very bitter end. Yeah, no pun intended. Because I think for me, whether this is true or not, bitter lends the most complexity in my brain to the things that I eat or drink. Mm-hmm. So I think I equate bitter things with a really hoppy IPA or my nice kind of bold roast in the morning. I'd think of wine at times as being pretty bitter in there too, along with everything else. So yeah, I don't think I give that one up. I think I could give almost everything else up besides bitter first.
And again, we could all do with less sweet maybe. But.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, right. But it's all a matter of taste, as the saying goes. So Paul, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Very fascinating. And I hope to talk to you again once I know 100 times more than I currently do.
Sure. Very fun. Yeah, very fun conversation. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on Fever for Flavor, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Evan Young, and produced by Studio D Podcast Production. If you want more content, go to feverforflavor.com. That's fever, the number 4, flavor.com. Feel free to email us at podcast@feverforflavor.com and follow us on Instagram @feverforflavor. Again, that's fever, the number 4, flavor. If you'd like to support Fever for Flavor, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. All you have to do is open up the podcast app on your phone, look for Fever for Flavor, scroll down until you see Write a Review, and tell us what you think. Join me next week as we continue to explore the world of food and flavors here on Fever for Flavor.